We're very excited about what I'm calling our Arkansas Hour of presentation with Stan and Rinda, who do a phenomenal program in 4 states: Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and does everybody know what the 4th state would obviously be? Yes, Pennsylvania. It's kind of an odd arrangement, isn't it? But we really wanted to focus on teacher work in this particular session, and teacher work in really 2 particular directions. Stan is going to be talking about his work in empowering students to take responsibility for their own engagement. Stan comes to us as an East facilitator from North Little Rock High School, and Rinda will be talking about the amazing work she's done with 18 faculty members across the state of Arkansas together in a PLC, and we'll be doing leading a conversation about the kind of work that can be done around peers. So when we talk about peers working together, we think that dots are really useful when you're in deep conversation. We always talk about the process of making a hypothesis and then trying to disprove the hypothesis, and then trying to make changes in the classroom that are useful. So the 2 pieces we're talking about here are working with peers and working with students. So with the working with peers, we think it's really just interesting to try to develop partnerships among faculty. This also has the benefit of not feeling supervisory, and to find time to visit each other and then to do sharing sessions. We just think that's a fairly standard way to go. We have a tool that we like to talk about called Peer View, which allows for really easy ways of collecting information. Essentially, the teacher who's going to be observed tells you what it is that they're looking for. Are they dealing with students equitably? Do they seem to, are they clear in their explanations? Do they smile? One of my favorite ones was, is there evidence of my smiling? That a teacher put into. The peer drops in and the data is recorded, and we find that in just a very few minutes you can collect a lot of data. We'd love to talk at some point about our peer review program for those of you who aren't using it and would be interested in looking at that. Then when you meet, you can review that data and then identify areas for improvement, and then see if your engagement dots change. So we wanted just to give you an example of this kind of work. One of our teachers in one of our schools, and some of you have heard this before, but a teacher who was finding huge engagement in advanced classes. Students in advanced classes were reporting huge engagement, and the ones in the remedial or standard classes were much lower engagement. So the teacher was asked to hypothesize about it, and she said, well, you know, generally students who are in advanced classes love the subject they're in advanced classes of, and students who are in standard or remedial classes don't. And so this makes perfect sense. How many of you buy that theory that advanced class students are generally going to be more engaged than regular students? So she went to her next door neighbor who also taught math, who had almost exactly the opposite constellation of dots, which led them to conclude that the original hypothesis was proved, at least in this case, not necessarily to be true, and then led the teachers to working together for that year to improve each other in the areas where they weren't particularly strong. So peer learning communities, we think, are really valuable and important work, and we're delighted to have Rinda working with us today to lead you in a conversation. She'll tell you just a little bit about the EAST program, and then talk with you in that session about some of the findings that, some of the conclusions that she has, and just get a sense of how this can work in schools. Another way that, as we talk about getting students involved, is a lot of teachers just show their students their dots. and say, hey, what do you make of this? And how do we together make for a better class? Now, we're very careful to say that what we are not looking for teachers to do is to try to identify which students gave which dots and then scream at the students that gave unfavorable dots. But how does a class and a teacher talk together about a constellation of dots? That's a way of getting students involved in the process that many of the teachers in our that we work with use. The second piece that empowers students that we just wanted to mention is there are all sorts of ways to get students to define what leads to engaged students. And I'm just going to give you the very briefest summary of a project we did at the Wellington School back in the day, in which we took 44 random pictures of school going on in our in various classrooms. We showed the pictures to students and asked them to tell us what quadrant they would put the experience in if they were actually in that picture. We asked them to define to say something about 4 categories: teacher, student, pedagogy, or room, space, and furniture, that made them put the picture in that quadrant. And then we collected data on that. So for instance, if you see this picture, if you are a student in that classroom, do you know what quadrant you think you might be in? Well, one of the students viewing this picture said that this picture put them in the board quadrant, and the dimension that the student selected was that of pedagogy. And of course, we explained to students what pedagogy meant, because we don't think that's a word students understand. Isn't it weird that students don't know what pedagogy is, and oughtn't they? And then part of what they said was, lecture has everyone leaning backwards. Now that gave us data that leaning backwards and lecture and this data point lead to boredom. Now I will say, as we did this, that lecture appeared in all 4 quadrants, but in the, and most in the grind quadrant, but it's data that we collected. So how about this picture? Do you have a sense of where you would be, what quadrant this would put you in? Well, one student told us that they were in the engaged quadrant and then chose the dimension room, space, furniture, and wrote, use of large boards for each group is an interesting way, is interesting in a good way. This actually led us at Wellington to buy a lot more rolling whiteboards, which on survey turned out to be the most effective piece of technology we ever bought at the school. So having said that, we collected all of this data at the Wellington School, and we came up with essentially 3 important factors that we then looked for. And this was information given to us by our students through this process. One was that mobility led to engagement. The longer somebody was sat in the soldered chair facing forward, the less engaged they were likely to be. 2, and very powerfully, autonomy. When students had some decision-making power in their day, they were much more likely to be engaged. And 3rd, and this is no surprise to anyone who's ever taught, that a connection between the teacher and the student led to engagement. So by using student input, we were able to gather conclusions that we then would look for in various classrooms. So the third thing, the next thing that you can do is you can give students the reins to engagement in their area. And we're very excited to have Stan give us some information. And this is Stan, who is an East facilitator from North Little Rock High School, who has done something fairly revolutionary in his work with students. So I think now, Brendan, we're going to ask people to sign up for one of the 2 sessions, and we'll take a break until 11, let's say 11, oh wait, we're at 11:12, 11:20? 11:20?
Sure? Are you sure?
11:20. We will break
Okay.
until 11:20. So please put in your chat where you would like to go.
Okay,
So this side of this breakout session to me is really more talking about faculty. So I'm really glad that you joined us for this one, Ralph. They asked that I share just a little bit about East because we are a different animal, and now I know you've heard about East several different times. So we're 25 years old, a little over now, but we are an elective program that can be added to any school, K through 12. It started in a high school as a means to take care of the knuckleheads, and has since been adapted far beyond that over the years. Our key goal with East is student growth, period. But we accomplish that through the facilitation of community service learning. We challenge our students to identify real and true community problems. We provide industry-grade technology, a wide variety of it, in each classroom so that they have that tool to help solve the community problem, but we don't want them doing it alone. We want them working directly with community partners, adults in the community, and serving a real and true purpose. So we have seen everything from students solve their own problems. For example, one student was able to, over the course of a couple of different years, figure out how to 3D print his own prosthetic leg. Once he learned how to do that, then he was able to start using that for others and print additional prosthetics of different kinds for other people. Students have solved flooding problems in their communities, and they've done things. They've worked with food pantries to help redesign warehouses to be able to accommodate things better. So it's a wide variety of community projects that we see all across these 4 states that we work in. And it's always amazing to me because every year we see something completely different than the year before, and from classroom to classroom, and it's exciting. So that's just a little bit about us and what we do, kind of our philosophy behind that. But we've used this tool now 3 different iterations, 3 different years. The very first year, we provided it to some of our programs and just asked them to put it in their school and then give us a report at the year end of how did it go. And we tried to help out with some introductions about what the tool was, how they can use it. But to us, the key point in us wanting to use it was reflection, because reflection is such an important part of our elective program, from both a facilitator, a teacher standpoint, and from a student standpoint of learning to be reflective on your own progress. So that was our first iteration. Our second iteration, we expanded that a little bit, but we also included just a few schools that we were looking at from our side. So like I said, we worked kind of like our nonprofit was the district, so that we actually got to see the dots. Because as an elective paying for this to go into another school, there was a real downside. I didn't get to see any dots until the end. And we wanted to know how was it going and how are people using it. So this past year we tried it again, and we're actually planning on expanding what we did last year in the coming year. We used 18 of our programs, and they were all controlled under the East District, so that we did get to see all of the dots all of the time. And like I said, then we implemented generic classes within that so that students had a realm of comparability. You know, how how would I rate my English class? How would I rate my science class, math, East, whatever? Because we felt like if they were only putting in an East dot, it may not be as accurate if they didn't have that full breadth of their schedule to work with. I will say personally, I have learned a brand new appreciation for counselors in putting together rosters.
Yep.
That's been one of my big takeaways. But the biggest reason that we're undertaking this and continuing to is we have always had a extremely strong network of facilitators. They are very willing to help one another, but by and large, they're unicorns. They are the only one of their kind on their campus, and or maybe the only one of their kind in their district. So they do not enjoy the traditional PLC that an English department or science department or math department might. So we really wanted to use this tool to help drive and create a stronger PLC that wasn't just I'm being helpful to you in this XYZ situation that you're having, because they're great about reaching out and saying, hey, I've got a kid that's exploring this technology. Has anybody else used it? Have you got any pointers? And they're great about sharing that kind of information. But we wanted to use it to really create that solid PLC of reflection, both for them personally and to be able to ask questions within their classes and drive greater, deeper conversation with their students. So that's kind of how we're using it and how we're looking at it. So like I said, Ralph, it's kind of a different animal. You guys please come off mute. There's 4 of us. I don't think we're going to interrupt one another.
Oh no, Rinda, you never know.
Totally invite you to come off mute. So I will say, and Carmen, please jump in, because Carmen has been part of this PLC this past year. We kind of went into it, like I said, scratching our heads, like you, Ralph, of how do we use this and what are we doing with it. So we spent the first, we collected dots, let me back up for a sec, about every 6 weeks, or no, about once a month, because we didn't get started until October.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Sounds
I think
right. Yeah.
first dot collection for the group. So October, November, December, the first dot collections. Behind every dot collection, we had a PLC meeting. And those first few were just really figuring out what are the dots and what am I seeing. And then this spring, we really moved more into what I would say was more of a true PLC.
Yeah.
Of sharing the information with one another, asking questions. We had participants in classrooms from 3rd grade all the way up through 12. So we spent a lot of time looking at what are the engagement levels. For instance, we found that 8th grade just really sucked in engagement all year long for everything. So we spent a lot of time talking about, just natural student growth and milestones that kids hit, and how does that play in? How does their matriculation through school play in? So we asked some of those kind of questions of ourselves, and it's been a real interesting growth process through that. So Carmen, jump in here, please.
Well, this is my 2nd year as a facilitator. So, of course, last year was COVID, so it wasn't even a real year. So this is, and then I got involved with the dot collections and the data. But I come from a background from an international baccalaureate school that's also very student-centered, very inquiry-based, very, it's very student-driven on that end too. So switching from that to being an East facilitator, where you're still doing kind of a student-driven curriculum, it was a natural shift for me. But adding the information that I'm getting from the dot collections, it's been very eye-opening to me, to see where my students fall. Connection's never been a problem with myself, my students. I've always had good relationships with my students. But when I see those dots where I have students who are not falling in that engaged category, it makes me question, okay, so it's a 5th grade group that's having this problem, or it's a 6th grade group. What am I doing different in 6th grade that I'm doing in 4th grade? And how can I shift that over, given 2 years of maturity? How can I change that over? So, and the PLCs that Rinda's leading with this, and we're all going through this kind of process together where we're asking questions of each other, and well, why is yours here, and what are you doing right now, those kinds of things. It's just really been very helpful in guiding me as I guide my students. So I think next year, as we get into more of the questioning, as far as reflection on our part, I think it'll even be more eye-opening as to what am I doing that I could do better. So I've enjoyed it a lot. I like that, always have. So when I get all excited when I see all those little dots, but it's been very helpful for my personal classroom, my teaching.
So Ralph, I know you mentioned quantitative, qualitative data. That's one of the reasons why we really started exploring the Wellington and began using it, because of the nebulous nature of our elective, and because we don't have a high stakes testing of any kind. We were really looking for something other than qualitative data, because that was what we collected, in truckloads. But we really didn't have any kind of quantitative. So seeing a dot kind of gave us that.
You have a coordinate, yeah.
Yeah. So that was part of why we jumped on this bus. But I'm really curious, in starting to use it, like, how have you guys worked it into your PLCs, or are you doing it like by department, by full school? How are you developing your PLCs around your new use of the tool?
Well, I mean, we're so brand new to it that we really haven't implemented that part of it yet. And that's sort of why I'm in this session, to listen and to ask some questions of you all. I had a couple questions about how you went about implementing it. Who drives the questions when you're observing, when peers are observing the classes? Is it the teacher who's being observed, or administration, or the teacher who is observing? Or is it a combination of all three? How does that play into the PLC experience?
So the 18 schools that participated this past year, the two closest were probably 50 miles apart. So there was no peer observation. There was no, and it was COVID, so I wasn't allowed in the building. To do admin side, which I'm not admin, I'm support, but
Sure.
So I would say that part of it has very much so not been traditional for us. It has really, our observations have really been centered more in the time that we spent as a PLC.
Okay.
And on each person looking introspectively at their own dots. But then we would pull together, Brendan and Rob helped us Brendan did it, Rob didn't do it. He would pull together a collective for us of, here are all the East dots from all 18 schools, averaged out. So we would use that as kind of our basis for our discussion. Here's our average. You can see your own. What questions are these driving?
Okay. All right.
And we didn't have the peer observations But I knew another facilitator personally who was almost doing the same thing, doing the collections. And so he and I had several conversations outside of the PLC about, okay, so what are you doing with this group of students? Why is yours this high here? So even though it wasn't like an observation, like I felt like I had another facilitator who was actually, you know, my equal, my team, you know, my person that I could go to. He's been facilitating for a lot longer than I have, and so I valued what he had to say. And then I worked in the same district with him, and he respected me as a classroom teacher. So we had a, you know, we had a relationship where I could say, okay, shoot me straight, what am I doing wrong? And he would say, you know, he would tell me. So that, not necessarily an observation, but having a partner that you could talk to, even though we are 100 miles apart now, we're still, you know, we're still doing the same thing. So that was helpful as well.
I think that brings up kind of an interesting question in my mind, because working with a lot of different schools all over the place, and then with you all in East as well, some schools we've worked with say it's extremely advantageous that they've gotten the science teachers to sit down with the English teachers, to sit down with the math teachers, and the fact that they can all meet and talk dots and figure out what we're doing and that's similar and different and what could we do better has been a really valuable opportunity, because they're all doing different things and they don't get to share perspectives that often. But then at the same time with East, it's been extremely valuable having everyone in the same classes, the same situations, even those spread across different schools. So I guess I'd be curious to know, or to discuss, how would it be best to make these sorts of peer groups within a school? Would it be best to say 6 through 12, all the English teachers, or would it be best to say 6th grade, all the teachers? You know, it's an interesting thought to me, and I'm not sure which one would be best, or do you do both, or just how does that work?
I've done curriculum planning both ways, and that's a little different than what we're doing. But with curriculum, to me, when you're on a grade level, because all of those kids are at the same developmental level, and we start talking about like how 8th graders suck at everything. Well, you don't, if you've got a 4th grader talking to an 8th grade teacher, you know, your 4th grade kids are excited and your 8th graders are not excited about anything. That's not going to work as well as if you had all the 8th grade teachers on one level, because they all hate it. So to me, that makes more sense.
Okay.
So I will say, Ralph, kind of the shift that we made here toward the end of the year, in this first year of really working with all of our programs together, we would start with a full group PLC. We met for about an hour and a half each time, but we would start with a full group just to everybody look at all the dots kind of thing, you know, that we were all looking at the same thing every time. But then we actually broke into smaller breakout sessions. And I would say, and Carmen, correct me if I'm wrong, but those breakout sessions, by going down to smaller groups, that really drove conversation more than anything else. And we didn't necessarily do a breakout by, okay, here was all our elementary people, here was all of our high school people. It was kind of more of a random, but even doing that, it really drove creating questions. And I think if you had a question to ask yourself or to ask of somebody else, then you started considering it for yourself. And that's what we're hoping to do, is expand it from 18 programs this year to about 40 in the coming. And we really want to take the 18 that were part of this PLC and use them in leadership roles in the coming year to help really drive those smaller group conversations. And we'll probably do some that are, okay, these are grade level groupings, but then we'll probably do some that are mix you up, you know, is it by school size or by community size or whatever. So I don't know, that's why I was curious to hear what kind of questions you had and how you've kind of attempted. using the information to this point.
I think what I'm getting from this now is that these outside conversations that sort of precede the actual formation of questions that you would be looking for and answering within an observation or the mutual help session, put it that way. And it's I think the conversations in this breakout groups and relying on common all not accepting but jumping off from the same point initially before the discussion is had. I think that sounds like a very effective approach. So yeah, I appreciate your sharing how you all are doing it. So.
We're learning as we go. I will say though, when we did the breakout sessions, we did kind of have like a key topic.
Yeah.
We sent them into that. And I definitely think that helped drive the conversations as well.
It was neat too having, because going back a little bit to the first session, talking about the benchmarking, it was neat having that sort of thing too. Like that was always a big part of it, where we would look at everybody's dots together, and then we could see, are most dots around this area, so that's good, or if they're a little lower on challenge, that's bad, whatever that means. But it was just helpful to see that in schools all over the state, similar programs. Like, I just think it's really cool. It was a cool program this past year.
We've got about a minute left. Ralph, any questions?
How did the faculty react to the implementation of the people that you had contact with? Were there, and I guess Carmen, I can direct that to you. How did your colleagues and how did you feel about this? Seems like you were fairly positive about it, and you seem to have found a soulmate in your in looking at each other's class, which I also seem to be taking that as a takeaway, that there has to be if this is going to work, there has to be mutual respect and actually enjoyment in sharing these ideas. But in general, the faculty, were they receptive to it?
It's only the East class that's collecting the dots, but I've shared the dots with my superintendent and with my principal to show, just to kind of give them an idea of this is what just my East students are saying about all of their classes, and this is how they feel about East, and this is why we need to continue East, because it is an elective and it can be, defunded or cut off or whatever at any moment. So as far as faculty, we were volunteered to be part of it, so that it wasn't forced on us. So I'm happy to do it and have enjoyed it very much, and I think it's benefited me professionally.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
All right, 10 seconds. Anything in the last? Be quick. Be quick.
Thanks for joining, Ralph. I appreciate it.
All right. I'm trying to where I can share my screen, get my screen up so we can see everything. And believe it or not, I have not done many Zoom meetings the way my class is set up. So I hit share screen. This is right here. I want to share. Y'all are showing up over there. Yes.
You go up to slideshow.
There it goes.
There you go. He's got it.
Yeah, my name's Stan Whisnant. I'm a facilitator. Give me a quick 28 years teaching, 10 years as facilitator. I was actually in an AP for 4 years. So I don't like that job. I'm done with it. So I had to go somewhere else. Some things to think about. Now, throughout the presentation, in the little white boxes are quotes from my students. So there's some things that they came up with. Give me something. In East, we look at students' involvement, student projects. It's student-driven, student-oriented. So something to think about, we asked this to my kids, one of our ways to try to get kids involved. Changing your thinking changes your beliefs, change expectations, attitude. All those things kind of have impact. So the question we ask our students is my desire to succeed and to improve my life strong enough to allow me to change my way of thinking? If we can get kids start thinking about other ways to become engaged, how do we do that? And that's where it led me with the Wellington and all that, is student engagement. And EAST, a little bit about EAST, if y'all don't know about what it is you have a cart. On the cart is our critical thinking skills, advanced real, and teamwork. And we try to have kids, how full is your cart? Is your cart, with what you're doing? Well, the cart also works into what we believe. Now, on the right-hand side is the actual post I put in my classroom, so you can kind of see how they correlate to each other. Students can and should take responsibility. Students should be actively engaged in solving problems. Students should be given access to relevant information. Students should be allowed or even required to collaborate. All those things to me are engagements. So the pandemic forced me to try to find a way to get more engaged, because half of my kids were virtual, half of my kids were face-to-face. It's real hard to do EAST when you're at home. So how do we get that process working? So I started the process after we left last March. How do we get this better when we get back to school? It works for the most part, but that could be any students as you go through. What were some of my goals, the leadership team that I created?
Hey, Stan.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Could you just say a word about what a student might do in EAST?
I can do that.
Like,
and EAST is, if people think EAST is technology, I have kids who are going to Harvard this year for engineering. I have kids going to University of Arkansas for nursing. I have kids who are going to PT, Pesky Tech, for welding. EAST is project-based, where we try to find things in the community to help the community along, whether it be the school, the city, the state, or the country. EAST is education is different in EAST. It's not normal. I don't sit and teach. I facilitate. I'm a guide. I'm a director. Okay, go do this. I want to work with this. I want to learn Photoshop. Learn it. How? Figure it out. I laugh, walk away, but I promise you the kids who are motivated will figure it out. Well, that's what EAST is about. It gives those kids the opportunities to really find what their passion is. What is it I want to do in life?
and could you give an example of one project that is memorable that kids did?
One good question on that one. I have too many. The
Right.
one that we love doing the most was called I Like Me's. We work with the Rotary Club in North Little Rock, and we input all the kindergartners' data into a database, and then a book company will actually make a book for those kids, and then we go read to those kids in school. The book is geared to each student, and it's about friendship. It's about social issues. It's about reading. Get those kids in kindergarten more willing to be involved in reading. Get them started on the process. We've done that for 10 years now. And that's a project the kids love to do. Another one is I Like Me, is a Be a Buddy. We have special ed kids we work with. How can we engage special ed kids? People count them off as they're special ed. They can't do anything. Well, that's not right. They have skills and they have talents. Let's just find them and work with them. So the Be a Buddy club that they created worked with the special ed kids in our school. And so that's kids teaching kids, student engagement. So that's just a couple of the projects that we have.
Thanks.
And I go on and on and on. If you give me a day or two, I can keep doing. But that's pretty much what EAST is doing. So this was my goals for leadership team. Well, what I did is I kind of had an idea. I want to have a group of kids to work with another group of kids. So the kids help the kids. Well, that's what EAST is about, is student engagement, student collaboration, student involvement, student teaching student, not just high school, but also middle school and elementary. So we're working K through 12 now, is what we're trying to do with our program. With the KWLs, after 1 year, what did I know? What did I learn? The thing that I learned the most, that really what I want to go to, is I have to let go of my preconceived notions and allow kids to take a chance. They're kids. They're going to mess up. That's fine. Address it, fix it, and move on. That when students become engaged, when with an opportunity that they trust it, you have to take faith in them. That students are capable of great things when given a chance. I've had kids try some things that they never would have tried before, and what happened is they succeed, and those light bulbs start going off all over the place, and they're excited. Most classes don't give that opportunity. You don't do that in history class. You sit back. I'm a civics teacher. I talk, you listen, you take notes, you do this, we move on. In East, it's not like that. We want the students to be able to take responsibilities for their own learning, for their own education, for their success. I'm just like a conductor. I'm moving, I shove it on down the line. Anna Kavanagh, at the very bottom, this is her quote. She said, get out of my comfort zone. That's what East is about. I'll make you feel uncomfortable on purpose. And the kids thrive in it. They absolutely love that opportunities to try something new. I've had kids change entire career paths because they had the chance to try something. Well, the leadership team is what we're trying to do is to better fine tune those efforts, give them the opportunity to do those things. The organization that we have in the middle of my core team, this is new this year, is East Core. I'm gonna have 6 to 8 kids that they're gonna be like the main part of the team. And then you're gonna have another 24 to 30 students that are the leadership team. Then it goes out from there to the middle school, elementary, and then the community members. I have about 30 to 38 kids of 150 that are going to work with everyone else. The kids will be given mentors or mentees that they will be responsible for keeping up with. They're going to talk to them on a weekly basis, ask them questions, get personal with them, get in their business. And the thing that we had to tell the kids is we have to be real with them. If we can get them to buy in to the what we're trying to do, we're going to see this work. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. The SWOTs, students, the strength of the last students' engagement, problem solving, participation, peer, self-directed learning, all those are in a cart. That's what East is about. What are the weaknesses? Did I pick the right members? Did my core team pick the right leadership team? Having the right member is critical to having success. I picked a kid who I thought would be successful, be good, ended up being pretty weak. So the team had to address him on how to make him stronger. And I told the core team what I wanted, and they went to him and said, we got to start doing these things. So he upped his game. Well, the opportunities the student can be engaged in all classes, to build each program to make it stronger for all students. Well, I want kids to get to the high school with that foundation for each set, with the understanding of what engagement is set, with the understanding of what we do set. That's going to make my program stronger, project stronger, community commitment stronger, students stronger. And then one of the threats is not all students will buy in. I had a couple who just would not respond. I hate to write off kids. We tried. Eventually, you know what? We got to write them off, and we move on. Communication is an issue. Having kids virtual and face-to-face cause some problems. So how do we address those issues? And then we have some that just unwilling to follow through. That's being leadership team members and students themselves. But what we found out is when we went to the middle school with those kids, they were more enthusiastic. So they have high school kids, and they went by themselves to the middle school and worked with those kids about each project. I have an issue with Unity game design. Well, I have a kid who's very good at that. Hey, Vincent, go down there and talk with them. Okay. So now you have a high school student teaching a middle school student about some gaming program, whether it be coding or whatever, and now the kids are more engaged. Those kids want to learn from, if I said it to them, they blow me off. If you say it to them, they blow you off. But if another student says it to them, now they're willing to listen. We want to make sure we give them the opportunity to do those things. This quote is from my chief project manager. I have one kid I pick, or that is picked for me, that there are no secrets. I mean, they know everything going on. Rob and Brendan's met her many times. She is a person that is my right-hand person. I asked her for a quote before we went for the summer, and this is what she came up with. The thing that strikes me, if you read through this, it says we as a team, we as a group. It's not me, it's not as a facilitator, it's not them as a student, it's we as a group of students who want to help other students. That is so critical in allowing these kids the opportunities to be successful. So we got to make sure they have that chance to be successful. I got to keep moving my mouse around so I can see the pictures. Sorry about that. But I thought her quote was very on point about what the leadership team is for, what it's about, what it does. It's a way that we can motivate our students. It's a way that we can inspire, support, and watch them grow. It's not just for East. My daughter was a leadership team member, and she, happy birthday, things go. She got to know those kids personally. They respond to that. So you have that personal connection. It's not just in East, your math grades are dropping. What's going on in math? Do you need help with science? How can I help you? Or find someone who can help you. That's what it's about. It's the whole person, not just in my class alone. And that's the critical part about that. So I was given 4 kind of questions to look at. Why a leadership team? We'll talk about that here in a second. On role number B is what is and is not engaging the students. Well, what we found out is when students believe that what they are doing matters, it has purpose. Why am I learning this? Because you want to. I don't pick their projects. I don't tell them what they're going to work on. That's their decision. Here's your stuff, figure it out. When they do that and they understand that I'm being serious, because so many teachers is like, I teach, you listen. No, you are in charge of your education. That goes to the pedagogies. And as I reflected back on what that stood for, I remember reading this a long time ago and realized this is what East is doing. I'm not going to read everybody because we can all read ourselves, but you have the five pedagogies that Elliot put out and little description of them for you. And as I reflected on what I was doing, this is what East is. It is constructive, it is collaborative, it is integral learning, it's reflective, it is inquiry based. We're hitting all aspects. Now you may not live in one. You may go from point to point to point. You're traveling up down the road. But throughout 4 years, I have them for 4 years in my class. Through 4 years of East, you're going to live in some of those from time to time, doing something, being engaged, learning what you want to do. And now that we have middle school East, I can have kids who've had 7 years of East. So now they get a whole well-rounded body of knowledge about what we can do and what they can do. And then on the last one is how can assignments be made to accomplish the teaching goal? Well, that's being reflective. It goes reflective for a reason. Reflect on what I want to do. Do I really want to learn this program, or do I want to work with cameras? It makes them take a good self-reflection of what they want to do with their life. I've had kids, like I said, change their entire career path because of my class, because they chose to do something. They got engaged in something that was going on. That's the critical aspect that East trying to get these kids to understand. The leadership team takes all these things and then tries to find a way to motivate those students. When Rob and Brandon showed me my data for my dots, I was very surprised. Most of my kids were in the first quadrant. We had some outliers. My question, how do we move this one from here up to here? We don't know who it is. They won't tell me. I asked, they won't tell me. But I want to know, and I tell my team, how do we move those kids from here to here? So they come with questions that they want to ask the team members. Every week I have a reflection. It's for a grade. And they give me the question to ask the whole class. So now they are directly involved in trying to find ways to motivate and engage those kids.
Which includes, Stan, giving your leadership team all of your data, all of your dot data.
Right.
Which is the thing that you're the only person I know who's doing. Like they have their own account to see your dots.
It was give Caitlin my access. Let her ask the questions. Let her see the data. Let her do those dot collections when she wants to do something. Let's find a way to engage the students, involve the students, motivate the students, move that dot.
Hey, Stan, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Did you, was it important for you to know that you had good dots before you gave access to your dots to your students?
Really, to me, it didn't matter. It's a starting point. We got to start somewhere.
Right.
Next year, a whole new set of data. But I have about 60 kids that I had last year come back. So I have about half my class that is new to this process.
And Stan, if you had bad dots, would you have shared it with your students?
Yes, I would.
Because
I
it's
don't hide it from them.
because it's their in part because it's their responsibility to bring the dots up. It's not just you.
It's not me. We do it as a group. I give them my expectations, leadership team, then I back away. They then run with my expectations and do what needs to be done. So that's the whole key is what I know, Caitlin knows, the core team knows, leadership team knows, and then the whole class knows. Because they know I'm here to help them. If they know we're here to help, they're willing to put forth the effort. If we're here just BSing them, they don't care. We got to make sure that we're involved in those things. General question, I'm going to kind of go through this kind of quick here because I only got about 7 more minutes. While leadership team already had a chief project manager, and we talked about this when we left last year in March. We talked over Zoom about what we could do, and so we got this process going in March. So when school started, we had some things to go with. My job is to ensure they accomplish those goals. We have each students take ownership of their education, leadership team, determine the projects, engaging students. I always tell my kids, set your foundation. If you don't set your foundation, your projects fail. If you don't, I want to learn Photoshop, then learn Photoshop. That's fine. I don't care. You don't want to learn Photoshop, don't do it. Don't do what you don't want to do. Be engaged, involved, and set your foundation. And if it is set strong, the projects are successful. If you have, you know what, do it, they fail. So the leadership team's goal is to make sure that they have projects that they want to work on. Worked with the middle school kids this year, saw a huge import in that. And then because of COVID, we couldn't do some things, but we started working with the elementary 2 years ago, right before COVID hit, where we go down and talk to the STEM teachers, and our high school kids teach the elementary kids. Let's introduce them to each concept, each ideas, each thoughts, each practices, each all those things. So they get to middle school, they're more willing to do all that. Did it work? Yes. We saw 45 upcoming freshmen want to take East this year.
Wow.
A third of my class are upcoming freshmen. I love it because they understand what's being done. Because we work with them in the middle school. The leadership team went down there and talked with them. They are engaged and involved and know what I want to do. So it's going to make my program stronger at the high school, but it's also going to give those kids the chance to be more successful. Did it change the perceptions? When they know, I'm very honest with my kids to the point I make them cry sometimes with love because they know I care, they accept it. Parents, I've taught my kids parents, okay, so I can't say much, but I just had one get married though the last weekend. The leadership team is involved and excited about helping. The team was excited. They want to take East to the next level. So let's work with what we got to work with. They understand East is the class they want to stay in. Again, you have it for 4 years. Students' roles, paired leadership members with a mentee. Each one had 3 or 4 members. Contact them on a weekly basis. Get to know the mentee, help the mentee, responsible for matching up students. We had to change them around. They didn't meld very well. So we had, but that's the leadership team who makes that decision. They met, believe it or not, without me being there. I was not there. Y'all meet, do your thing, let me know what happens. So it's their responsibility to do all those things. I gotta hurry. Responsible for deciding what they want to do and learn, that's student responsibilities. I want to learn coding, Python, do it. Here's your book, here's your resources. I have all the resources they need. Here it is, learn it. Become lifelong learners. Data is shared completely. I don't hide anything from my kids. What they send me, they got. Now they get their own data. We want to make sure the leadership team engages those students to be meaningful, not just some blow smoke somewhere. What's next? More efficiency with the leadership team in terms of documenting what we're doing. who's working, not working. How can we work with those kids that need to be moved over better? And then of course, work with the middle school kids. And I won't do any questions, but I want to show you, these are some of my kids in action. The one over here in the top left-hand corner is the middle school. The one in the middle with East Initiative is Valonia. This one up here on the right is my daughter, the green screen. But you see, these are different things my kids are working on just in East in general. They pick these projects. This one up here with East Initiative is GIS. We're 3D mapping of Valonia Cemetery. Okay, working with drones and ArcGIS and all those things. And on this one here, it's just a smorgasbord of the kids in action about what you can do for engagement. And of course, the little Zoom box down here in the middle with all the little pictures, that's the leadership team. Took a screenshot, there they are. That's them in action. That's them making things happen. Doing the leadership team has been a change for the class because it's student ownership. Students are involved, students are engaged, students are the ones making decisions. Now I make sure that they're not illegal, unethical, or go get them hurt. Yeah. But beyond those three things, how do we make students take for their learning? The last slide I have, if you have any questions, this is my contact information. Feel free to email me. I'll talk to anyone about what we do with my kids. You talk to my kids, talk to my kids. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And again, I got 30 seconds. Any questions? It goes by fast.
That's amazing, Stan. And Stan's quite right that Brendan and I don't meet with Stan. We meet with Caitlin, his project supervisor, to go over dots. And I think there's a level of confidence as a teacher to hand that kind of information over to your students. So.
It's scary sometimes. You have to have faith in your kids.
Yeah.
If you pick right, then it's going to work fine.
Yeah.
So 4 seconds. Anyway, I'll see y'all back on the other side.
We could have used another hour, I think.
I think so. All right, well, let's stay consistent. Let's have the Stan's group, because you had Rob, so you got to share back first.
Well, I'll just start by saying that the EAST program itself is a fascinating project-based learning piece, and I'm sure you got that in both of the sessions. But the thing that I commented on a couple of times is that if Stan wants his kids to take responsibility for something's happening to my screen. But I don't need to worry about that. Okay. That if Stan wants his kids to take responsibility, then one of the things that Stan does is he gives them the data for student engagement with the expectation that they'll solve student engagement issues in the same way that they'll solve any of the issues of the work that they're doing in the program. And that I think that takes a certain degree. One of the things I asked Dan was, if you knew you had bad dots, would you be sharing it with students? And he said, yep, it's a starting point. But this notion of engagement being the responsibility, and Ralph, to me, one of the things that's really interesting is that, one reaction that teachers may have is, here's a thing that might be critical of me, or that may have supervisory implications that are difficult. But where Stan is this isn't about me, this is about us. And I'm not I don't have sole responsibility for student engagement, and here's a place where we can start to work together, students and teachers, and I just find that to be a very powerful and exciting concept.
I'd add that we had 18 schools participating this year with using the Wellington, and I would say the majority of our facilitators who used the tool shared their dots with their students and allowed for the student reflection side of, here's what we see as a whole for this class and or for our program altogether. And several of our facilitators have asked about other classes as well. well, why didn't you, why is this class not as engaging as this other one? And they've really been able to share that information with their faculty members and with each other, by, by allowing those students to take the lead in it. So.
And I know that Caitlin, she asked Rob and Brendan a question one time that I'd heard of before. But that was her question. I don't know what it was, to be honest with you. But the students to move their dots, to make an impact, that means something to them. They know they have ownership in what they're doing. They'll be more willing to be engaged if they know that their input has value. If they're just blowing smoke, then they're just in a chair leaning back doing nothing. They don't care. But if they know that they have meaning, purpose, and it's going to go somewhere, we're not here to get you, we're here to help you, then they're more willing to be engaged. That's what I found through my program at the high school at North Little Rock.
And I think one of the things Caitlin asked us, Brendan, and was the first person ever to ask us, is could we take a look at students who were placed versus those
in East, yeah,
versus those who chose it, and to be able to differentiate engagement by that factor. So, and that was from, and she just finished her 10th grade year. Is that right?
She'll be a junior next year.
Yeah.
She'll be a junior. And she has to find a replacement for next year. So when she graduates, she has to find a replacement, which will be my CPM, and she leaves her senior year.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's her job.
Yeah. Got it.
She's the only student in the world to have a account to view dots. Stan wanted her to be able to just log in and look at his dots. So it's crazy.
I love it.
All right. And how about our session?
So we visited about PLCs and kind of, as much as anything, Ralph is kind of on the same trajectory that we are of still really kind of being fairly new using it, even though I've had exposure to the tool for the last 3 years. This was our first iteration of working kind of like a district and bringing all of our facilitators together. So we're still on the learning curve of the PLC, and how do we best share the information that we're seeing collected as a whole, and then using that to drive individual reflective questioning. So Ralph, I'm going to ask, kind of what were your takeaways from this? I'm going to pick.
I think the conversations that occur between different groups, not one group, but many different groups outside of the classroom, the bonds that are formed there, the questions that are raised there, I think that's key to a successful implementation of this. And so that was my main takeaway, is that there has to be there have to be relationships that are enhanced, and the key is that everyone is in it together to help each other, and if that is accepted, I think that it can be an extremely successful program. So that was my main takeaway. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
I know when Rinda and us, we have those PLCs, I enjoy them. They go long sometimes, Rinda, and I love it. The conversation that we have is what we need to hear. I think the facilitator is very honest and open. I don't hide my punches through facilitators either. But having that PLC to reflect on that question, of course, what she sends me, Caitlin gets a copy of that as well, and she's known that, so that Caitlin knows what we're seeing. And then that drives leadership team that we talked about in our session. But the PLC to me is important because it gives me, it kind of validates what's going on. Is it making sense? Am I seeing something that's not there? Or something I'm not seeing there? I have to have a vision on. And I love those meetings that we have with the East. PLCs.
So Gwyneth, can I pick on you for just a sec?
Sure, yeah.
So I'm curious, I know you've been using the tool for a couple of years too. Did you find that the longer you used the tool, the more effective your PLCs were in challenging and bringing questions, reflective questions to your teachers?
Hard to say because we had year one and then year two was this year. So, I mean, to even say that we had PLCs this year would be a big stretch. Yeah, we were not able to bring people together in the way that we wanted. I mean, in a way, it was like, I was talking to my head of school about this just the other day. Like, I wanted to keep gathering data this year because I think longitudinally it's important, but I just felt like there were so many variables this year for kids and for teachers that to pretend we could draw any useful conclusions from the data we collected this year would have been like really presumptuous. So, so ask me again in a year, because I am really excited to see as we get back to a more normal way of operating. And I'm not asking teachers to, teach their 14 students in 2 classrooms with students zooming in from China simultaneously. I feel like maybe the numbers will tell us something a little more useful and more to the point. Because as I said before, like the engagement stayed the same, but I think for me to have asked any teacher this year to be like, well, let's look at these grindy kids and see what's going on with them. Like, I think it would have been really tone deaf, Teachers were in survival mode this year. I did not ask them to do a lot of like pedagogical goal setting. But
I think too, one of an interesting difference between Gwyneth's and Rinda's work is that in the East PLCs, no one has any supervisory responsibility at all for anybody else.
yeah.
And because the East facilitators are supervised by the school administration, not the East administration. And when Gwyneth is working with folks, she's working with department chairs and folks who do have supervisory responsibility. And yet I think you've both found really fertile ground for discussion, perhaps not so much in the COVID year, but
Yeah, I would agree.
Which I think also then disproves the notion that if anyone with supervisory responsibility is involved, it can't work. Because I think it's worked in both circumstances. I think how it's framed is really significant. We're really right at the end of our time, and we promised you that we would say goodbye to you by noon. We've cut into our general chattering 10 minutes. It's now just 4 minutes. But thank you all for joining us. As has been the case in previous years, it's been exceptionally interesting conversation. And I've pulled a number of things that I think are really important for us as we move forward. And I'm just delighted to have had you with us for a couple of hours today. So thanks a lot. And Brendan and I will stick around for a little bit. But we thank you for joining with us. Brendan, last words.
Yeah, been great having y'all. And if there's any questions or further conversation or anything y'all would like to have, you can get in touch with us here and we'd love to chat. So thanks again. We'll be here, like Rob said, until everyone's left in case anybody wants to chat.
And special
thanks
to Rinda and Stan and Brian and Gwyneth for
absolutely
for hosting our rooms with such elegance and precision. So thank you all. Have a great summer.
Thank you all so much.
You too. Great to see you.
Great to see you.